You've probably seen the headline before. A billionaire earns $1 a year. People like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, founders and CEOs who control massive wealth, yet their salary looks like a joke. And the first reaction is always the same. How is that legal? How can someone be worth billions and still show almost no income? They are not living on a salary. They are living on assets. More precisely, they are living on access to their assets without selling them. This is where the buy, borrow, die strategy enters the picture. The idea is simple on the surface. Buy assets that rise in value. Borrow against that value instead of selling. And over a long enough timeline, the tax system can reset much of the capital gains burden when those assets transfer. That is how someone can report almost no income and still fund an enormous lifestyle. The cash comes from loans, not paychecks. That is the power. But there is also a dangerous side that rarely gets discussed. This strategy relies on leverage. Used carefully, it preserves assets and reduces taxes. Used recklessly, it creates fragile balance sheets. Falling asset values, rising interest rates, or poor cash flow can force sales at the worst possible time. My name is Alex, and in this video, I'm going to break buy, borrow, die down, step by step, with caution built in. We'll walk through what assets actually work, how borrowing really functions, where people get hurt, and real examples that make the mechanics clear. If this kind of clarity is useful to you, tap the like button and stay with the video. Core concept: unrealized gains are not taxed. Everything in this strategy rests on a simple rule. Value is not taxed until it is realized. Imagine buying a building for $1 million. You rent it out, maintain it, and let normal appreciation take place. 10 years later, that same building is worth $2 million. On paper, you gained $1 million, but you never received that money in cash. You did not sell the property. Because of that, the tax system treats it as if no income was created. The tax bill on that appreciation is zero. The same logic applies to stocks. You buy shares for $1,000. Over time, they rise to $10,000. As long as you keep holding them, there is no capital gains tax due. The increase exists only as an unrealized gain. This rule is not limited to one asset type. Broad market index funds, rates, art, and even a primary home can increase in value year after year without triggering taxes, as long as they remain unsold. This is not a loophole or special treatment for insiders. It is how the system is structured. Taxes are triggered by transactions, not by ownership. Buy, borrow, die simply starts by recognizing this reality and building everything else on top of it. Step 1. Buy appreciating assets. Once you accept that unrealized gains are not taxed, the first step becomes clear and narrow. Buy assets that naturally increase in value over time, and then leave them alone. Think about a simple real estate example. A building was purchased for $1 million. Nothing dramatic happens. Rent comes in. Maintenance is handled. Years pass. Inflation and demand do their quiet job. A decade later, that same building is worth $2 million. The growth did not come from constant decisions. It came from holding. The same pattern shows up in stocks. You buy shares for $1,000. You do not trade them. You do not react to every headline. Over time, those shares are worth $10,000. The gain exists, but it stays on paper because nothing has been sold. This step is often misunderstood because people confuse appreciation with speculation. Buy, borrow, die does not rely on excitement or timing. It relies on long-term ownership of assets that benefit from economic growth. There is one important filter. The asset must be something the financial system respects. An asset that grows but cannot later be used as collateral breaks the strategy. So step 1 is about choosing assets that rise steadily, survive downturns, and remain useful for decades. Everything else depends on getting this part right. The lendable asset requirement. Not every asset that grows in value is useful here. The strategy only works if the asset can later be used as collateral. Consider a stock portfolio held at a major brokerage. Those shares are priced daily, easy to value, and easy to liquidate if necessary. Because of that, the brokerage is willing to offer a security-backed line of credit. You keep the shares, you gain access to cash. Real estate follows the same logic. A property that has appreciated can support a home equity line of credit or a loan secured by the property itself. The lender is comfortable because the asset is tangible, familiar, and historically stable. Some people extend this to cash value life insurance when structured correctly. The policy builds value over time and allows borrowing against that value. Certain retirement plans, like a 401k, may also allow limited loans, though those come with strict rules and trade-offs. An IRA, by contrast, does not allow borrowing at all. The pattern is consistent. Lenders advance money only against assets they trust. If something is hard to price, thinly traded, or dependent on hype, it will not qualify. In Buy, Borrow, Die, lendability is not a bonus feature, it is a requirement. Without it, appreciation stays locked and the strategy stops. Step 2. Borrow, instead of selling. This is where the strategy changes behavior. Instead of turning assets into cash by selling them, you use them as collateral and borrow. The reason this works is straightforward. Borrowed money is not treated as taxable income. A loan creates an obligation to repay, so the tax system does not count it as earnings. Imagine a house purchased years ago for $500,000. Over time, it appreciates and is now worth $1 million. You open a home equity line of credit and borrow $200,000. That money arrives without triggering capital gains tax or income tax. The asset remains intact. The same approach applies to other appreciating assets. A rental property can support a loan. A stock portfolio can support a security-backed line of credit. In each case, you access liquidity without shrinking the asset base that is still growing. This is how some households fund living expenses or large purchases while keeping their investments working in the background. The asset continues to compound. The borrowed funds handle today's needs. But this step demands restraint. Borrowing feels easier than selling because the tax pain is invisible. Used carefully, it preserves long-term wealth. Used aggressively, it replaces tax risk with debt risk. Borrowing versus selling, the real cost difference. Selling and borrowing can both put cash in your account, but the cost structure is completely different. Suppose you want $100,000 for a major expense. If you sell appreciated stock to get that cash, you may need to sell far more than $100,000 worth. Long-term capital gains tax alone can take 20%. Add state taxes and investment surtaxes, and the total can approach a third of the sale. You lose that money immediately, and it never comes back. Now compare that to borrowing. You borrow $100,000 against the same portfolio. There is no sale, so there is no capital gains tax. The cost shows up as interest instead. Depending on rates, that might be 4 or 5% per year. The difference is timing and flexibility. Taxes are permanent and upfront. Interest is gradual and spread over time. In many cases, it takes years for interest payments to equal what taxes would have taken on day one. There is another layer most people miss. If borrowed money is used for investment purposes, the interest may be deductible, reducing the real cost even further. This is why selling is often the most expensive way to access wealth. Borrowing keeps more of the asset working and lets time stay on your side. Life insurance as a borrowing tool. One part of this strategy often surprises people: the role of life insurance. Not for protection, but for liquidity. Certain life insurance policies build cash value over time. That value grows without being taxed as it accumulates. More importantly, it can be borrowed against. When you take a loan from the policy, it is not treated as income. It is simply a loan secured by the value inside the policy. Here's where it works differently from most loans. These policy loans do not require regular repayment during your lifetime. The balance can sit there for years while you continue using the money. Interest accrues, but there is no forced payment schedule in the way a bank loan would have. When the policyholder eventually passes away, the loan is repaid automatically from the death benefit. And the death benefit itself is not taxable. The borrower never writes a check to repay the loan. The policy settles it in the background, and whatever remains goes to the heirs. This does not make life insurance a shortcut. If the policy is poorly designed or overused, it can fail. But when structured correctly, it allows borrowing without selling assets, without triggering taxes, and without creating repayment pressure during life. Used carefully, it becomes a long-term liquidity backstop, not a gamble. Step 3. The step-up in basis. This final step is uncomfortable to talk about, but it completes the logic. At death, the tax system resets the math. When assets are passed on, their tax basis is adjusted to their current market value. What you originally paid no longer matters. The clock is effectively reset. Consider a simple example. A house was purchased years ago for $500,000. Over decades, it appreciated to $2 million. During that time, loans were taken against the property to fund life without selling. When the owner passes away, the property's tax basis becomes $2 million. If the heirs sell the house for $2 million, there is no capital gains tax. The sale price matches the new basis. Any outstanding loans are paid off from the proceeds, and the remaining equity transfers cleanly. The same principle applies to stocks and other appreciating assets. Gains that built up over a lifetime disappear for tax purposes at the moment of transfer. This step does not erase debt or guarantee safety. It simply removes the deferred tax burden that would have existed if the asset were sold during life. Buy, borrow, die works because it aligns behavior with this rule, allowing assets to grow, provide access, and eventually transfer without triggering the tax that selling would have created. Trading real estate without triggering taxes. There's another layer that often gets added during a lifetime exchanging assets without paying tax. In real estate, this is commonly done through a 1031 exchange. The idea is simple. Instead of selling a property, paying capital gains tax, and then buying another one you sell, and reinvest the proceeds directly into a new property. Because the money never exits the system, the tax is deferred. Picture the earlier example with 4 houses bought for $500,000 total. Over time, each property doubles in value. Instead of cashing out, those houses are sold and rolled into larger properties through an exchange. The portfolio grows in scale, but no capital gains tax is triggered. What matters here is continuity. The assets change, but ownership does not break. The value keeps compounding inside the structure. Borrowing still happens along the way. As the properties increase in value, loans are taken against them to fund life or new opportunities. The assets remain intact, and the tax bill stays deferred. Decades later, when life ends, the step-up in basis applies. All the deferred gains disappear for tax purposes. The exchange did not avoid tax forever. It delayed it until the system itself erased it. This is how long-term real estate portfolios quietly grow without repeated tax friction. Art and collectibles. Access without selling. The same logic can apply to assets that are less familiar, like art or collectibles, when they are valuable enough and properly documented. Consider a serious art collection built over many years. Pieces are acquired, held, and quietly appreciated as the artist's reputation grows and supply remains limited. On paper, the collection becomes very valuable, but selling creates a problem. Art sales can trigger high taxes, often far higher than standard capital gains, once state taxes and surtaxes are added. Instead of selling, owners of valuable collections often borrow against the art. Specialized lenders are willing to issue loans using the artwork as collateral. The owner receives cash without triggering a taxable sale, and the collection stays intact. This becomes especially relevant later in life. Medical costs, housing changes, or large expenses can appear suddenly. Selling art at that moment locks in taxes and may force poor timing. Borrowing provides flexibility without liquidation. When life ends, the same reset applies. The art receives a new tax basis at its current value. If the heirs choose to sell, the accumulated appreciation is not taxed. The loan is paid off, and the remaining value transfers cleanly. This does not turn collectibles into easy money. Liquidity is limited, and valuations can change. But when handled carefully, even unconventional assets can follow the same access without selling principal. Stocks. Same strategy, different wrapper. The same logic applies to stocks, even though the asset looks very different from real estate. Imagine buying stock for $500,000. You hold it for years. The businesses grow, earnings compound, and the market does what it usually does over long periods. Eventually, that portfolio is worth $2 million. The gain exists, but it remains unrealized because nothing has been sold. Instead of liquidating shares to fund spending, a line of credit is opened against the portfolio. Cash is borrowed while the stock remains invested. The portfolio continues to compound, and there is no capital gains tax triggered by the borrowing. Over time, that borrowed money may fund living expenses, investments, or major life events. The key is that the asset base stays intact. When the owner eventually passes away, the tax basis of the stock resets to its current market value. If the shares are sold at that value, there is no capital gains tax. The loan is repaid, and the remaining balance transfers to the next generation. This approach is often associated with well-known founders who borrow against stock instead of selling, but the principle is structural, not personal. Stocks work here because they are liquid, widely accepted as collateral. and easy for lenders to value. Key takeaway: buy, borrow. DI is not about avoiding responsibility or chasing loopholes. It is about understanding how the system actually treats ownership, borrowing, and time. Appreciation is not taxed until you sell. Borrowing provides access without triggering income. Holding allows compounding to continue. And at the end, the tax code resets the math. The power of this strategy comes from restraint, buying durable assets, borrowing conservatively, letting decades, not decisions, do most of the work. When used carefully, it preserves wealth. When misunderstood, it creates fragility. If this helped you see money differently, take a moment to like the video so more people can find it. And if you want deeper breakdowns like this, subscribe and stay with the channel.